Hello, I'm David Ben Murphy, and welcome to Telpax 1. Telpax with the number 1 is what it's called on Podbean, and other podcasts are distributed from that. And we're also transmitting, hopefully live, on YouTube. If you pick us up on YouTube, there's a toll-free number that you can call in on. So, provocative subject. By the way, the purpose of this broadcast is to elicit cross-examination of things I've already said on my channel, on the various podcasts before, particularly my testimony of 1997 describes my incarceration for 40 days and 40 nights in the county jail for false charges of kidnapping 2 little girls. All the charges were dropped. Nothing ever happened. It's amazing what little girls can say. They say the darndest things, don't they? So, masturbation. Is it a sin? Isn't it totally natural? Doesn't everybody do it? But in particular, did Jesus ever do it? That was the question. My sophomore year of high school teacher at Stepanak in White Plains, New York, Father Wilson, a Crozier father. There were a couple of Crozier priests at Stepanak at the time. The other one was teaching. He was drama, after school drama. I think maybe he was also English. I'm not sure. I had some experience in drama with him after school. But they were dressed like crusaders. They had these robes, black and white, and in particular, they had this cross, a distinctive cross that I understand was a Crusader cross, popular back then. And it's funny, I never encountered this Crozier order. Of course, these are monks, these are priests that are members of also a religious order. I'm more familiar with Dominicans. My own Uncle Alfred, was at the time a Dominican monk. He had been an archdiocesan priest, and he joined the Dominican order to become a doctor missionary in Pakistan, which he was at the time. I heard about Father Wilson and the Croziers. So, at the time when he said that, I didn't believe it for a second. How can anybody say such a thing? My disbelief was demonstrated by the fact that for at least a year, this was said in the spring of my sophomore year, and for at least a year or longer, I regularly went to confession before a priest, once a week, sometimes twice a week. And it was usually that sin that I confessed, among others that would occur to me. And the problem was, I would confess it, and 2 or 3 days would go by, and I would do it again. Confess, 2 or 3 days, do it again. And it was very distinctly taught, by other people, not Father Wilson. I remember my high school biology teacher, Mr. McCarthy, and that was at Fordham Prep in the Bronx. Somehow, the topic came up, and he said point blank, masturbation is mortal sin. And that was the common belief that we had. Okay. Looking to see if there's any calls coming in here on the Podbean live, and there isn't. I'm not going to continue this too long. Again, the purpose of a live broadcast is to get questions, criticisms, something, anything from anybody that might hear my broadcast. So I was continuing for a year. I went to confession a lot. I always made a point of going to a priest that didn't know me in a parish that didn't know me. Sometimes that would be at Fordham. Well, I was still going to Fordham, but of course after Stepanak, I would always be going to the next parish over and walking there usually. Always actually, since I didn't drive a car yet. And seeking the anonymous darkness of the confessional booth. Something, of course, doesn't exist anymore in the Roman Catholic Church. It does exist in the Byzantine Rite, the good old confessional box. Now, in most Catholic churches, there's a room, I think, in the back of the church. It's pretty nondescript and maybe marked, labeled or not. And that's supposedly where you go in to have confessions. It's not part of my experience. My Catholic experience is always the big boxes. The church I grew up with had 3 of them, and there would be 3 priests in the afternoon and in the evening. I think 4 to 6 and 7 to 9, I think. Hour off for dinner, I think that's what they did. And it was the ritual that you go through. Getting back to my high school, I blew a fuse in May of 1968. That would be my junior year of high school. I was going crazy. And what was driving me crazy was the idea of going from the state of grace, going to heaven, and flipping into mortal sin, going to hell. That happening once or twice a week. And it seemed to be wrong. I couldn't accept it anymore. Or maybe if I did accept it, I didn't care anymore. But that was my experience. I've really stopped, being a Catholic in the junior year of high school. After that, I went through the motions. I guess you had to be something. I'm pretty sure I stopped receiving communion though, out of respect. It's funny, when I visited New York back in the fall, visiting my sister, and I'd go with her always to Catholic Mass. In addition, I would find a local Protestant church or Christian church to also go to. And I noticed that there was very little attention given to confession anymore. I mean, most of the parishes had a half hour, maybe 45 minutes per week, one priest in the back of the church in the door, behind the door, opening to the conference room, whatever it was. But there seemed to be very little interest in going through the sacrament of confession. And the thing about the sacrament of confession, it was done for release, for me, it was always for one purpose only, to get relieved of the sentence of eternity in hell. That's why I did it. That's why I ever did it. I didn't want to suffer the consequences of mortal sin. But I think the real problem I had was never being able to talk to anybody about anything really. As a child, so we're in the second grade, and we're taught to get ready for our first communion and also get ready for our first confession. Naturally, you do the confession first and the communion after that. And we're given some guidelines. This is for second graders, so it's not any great detail. But the point is, and this is the point, that children are Catholic children are taught to evaluate themselves. They're taught to pass judgment on their own actions, because what you're expected to do is to give a laundry list of your sins with no specifics. I mean, mine went, I fought with my brother, I disobeyed my parents, typical. If it was my very first confession, I might talk about how I stole the 5-cent candy bar, the Chuckles, from the local Grand Union supermarket. I might talk about that. I talked about in my first confession I'm 7 years old. How I, in cartoon fashion, drilled a hole through the leather seat where my brother was sitting watching TV. I thought it'd be great fun. It didn't hurt him, thank God. And but it was things I did. I mean, as a kid. But usually it would be it was like a laundry list. I fought twice, disobeyed my parents 10 times. Later on, I add impure thoughts. Much later on, I would add masturbation. But of course, that was much later on. I didn't do that really until I was in high school. Nobody talked about it. The word was never uttered. My dad, the first time I mentioned the word to him, he said, I don't understand these long, complicated Latinized words. Of course, my dad loved Latin. He was a lawyer, been a Catholic all his life. He loved big words. He was joking, of course. It seemed like such a ugly word. And it was something, of course, that I discovered by accident. I mean, I think maybe most adults, young adults, teenagers, discover it. And they think, I don't know, when I discovered it, it was something, it was a secret, that's for sure. It was something I knew my brother knew nothing about. I had a fraternal twin brother named Eddie. He's now been dead for almost 2 years. I believe he died because he lost a reason for living. In fact, he had lung cancer. That was the apparent reason. Another reason. Lung cancer that spread throughout his entire body very, very quickly. But I think he gave up. And that's something I hope never to do. Well, so if anybody hears this, I do encourage you to listen to my 40 Days and 40 Nights podcast, because that's an insight to at least what my life was like 27 years ago. A lot has happened since. I'll be glad to talk about it, but I'd like to talk about it by being questioned, because I think questions will come up if anybody does listen to anything that is being broadcast. It's funny, I only listened to that taped recording for the first time, I don't know how many years, just a few days ago. And at the very end of the tape, from back then, I mentioned this prophecy. It may have been a true prophecy or a false prophecy, but it was a lady that made godly predictions for my life. And she said I would be doing something that nobody else was willing to do. At the time, 27 years ago, I thought it involved confession. Here I am, 27 years later, making confession, public confession. Am I casting my pearls before swine? I'm not sure that's the important question. The much bigger question, much more important thing is that I don't maintain secrecy in my life. I believe secrecy is the greatest deterrence to having a relationship with God and in real relationships with people. Anyway, it's 4:13, no calls, and I will say good night for right now, and hopefully talk to you next week, same time. Bye-bye.